Essence of Eternity. Chapter 2, Sneak Attack. After the visit and friendly battle of the Kingdom of Eretria and Sparta, King Gregorio achieved an alliance with the King of Sparta Aterios. While in the Kingdom of Archidona, its Queen Merivi did not look favorably on this alliance, since Eretria tried to expand its territory some time ago by sending workers to extract resources. The soldiers of Archidona, upon seeing this invasion of their territory, murdered several unarmed workers. The forces from Eretria they fought against the Archidones. Their fight was bloody and ended in the defeat of the swordsmen, who could not stop the rain of arrows that constantly increased their casualties. The forces of Eretria withdrew to their territory, and both kingdoms have a grudge against each other for what happened. However, both kingdoms are neutral with each other, since neither of them really wants a war. Gregory, after the friendly battle with Sparta, asked Aterios to receive Spartan training like any other swordsman who wanted it, since he wanted both kingdoms to share their culture with each other. Aterios accepted on the condition that the training would only be applied in Sparta, and a large part of the swordsmen and King Gregory traveled to Sparta to receive training and also share their skills. Both kingdoms prospered with each other, since they not only shared training and military skills, but also shared their technology, even improving the collection methods for the workers who were in charge of extracting resources such as wood, gold, and metal. During this time, Gregorio had a talk with Aterios, because he wanted to unify all the kingdoms that he could, and his next objective was the Kingdom of Archidona. Aterios said, "It is very brave that you want to unite all of us to create a very long time of peace, but it is dangerous. The Kingdom of Archidona is full of archers with skill not only in the bow and arrow, but also the sword. Its king passed away some years ago. Its current leader is Queen Merivi, and she is not a very diplomatic woman." Gregorio replied, "Eretria had a conflict during his government. I doubt that they will receive me peacefully if I show up, but even so I will try without soldiers and without weapons. I will go alone." Concerned Aterios replied, "I am very surprised by your conviction. It is admirable, but if you are going to try to negotiate an alliance with Archidona, do not do it alone. I will go with you." Gregorio appreciates his words, and they organize to travel to the Kingdom of Archidona at night without informing them of their visit, so as not to be seen by the explorers of the kingdom. Far away in the Kingdom of Alkmaar, Krenox was organizing another attack on Abijan territory, needing to steal more gold and other valuable resources from them. Hours before his departure, Medusa visited him to tell him, "I don't think it's a good idea to attack the territory of those mercenaries a second time with such a short period of time." Krenox replied, "I am aware of the risk, as they might have stronger defending forces now, but I now have the stalkers that I can easily replenish in battle. Also, I want to squeeze their full potential." Medusa with admiration asks him, "And what if the battle becomes very difficult?" Krenox before leaving replies, "A battle without difficulty is not a battle." Krenox leaves while Medusa with a smile watches him leave. Meanwhile, the territory of the Abijan continued to rebuild part of their homes, while the magicians and adepts kept their promise to defend them while they finished their construction. This group of defenders was made up of 4 Templars, 6 adepts, 3 magicians, and 7 sorcerers who, despite being few, together were very powerful and capable of defeating many enemies without receiving damage. During noon, part of the watchmen of the Abijan territory see in the distance a mass of creatures approaching them. These were stalkers who were full of anger and desire to kill. They advanced at full speed while the Abijans prepared to defend and communicated to the Gibraltar warriors about the impending attack. They headed to the area and prepared to defend. Krenox had sent a force of 300 stalkers to attack the territory, but he separated them into 3 groups, because, although he knew that this time the defenders would be prepared for his arrival, he would not leave empty-handed. The first group of stalkers he would attack from the north to distract the main defenders, while the remaining groups attacked the east and west side to plunder as many resources as possible. The sorcerers fought the stalkers very effectively, while the Abijans saw their great psionic potential, allowing them to easily eradicate the stalkers from a distance. The Abijans, although surprised, supported the magicians and adepts who defended their territory with their shields. The stalkers hit their shields, and although the Abijans resisted, they could not prevent several of the stalkers from continuing to advance towards the sorcerers who were exposed to attacks. It was when two of the Templars fused their energy to create a barrier that prevents the stalkers from passing, an advantage that the magicians take advantage of to destroy them with fire. The rest of the sorcerers were trying to defend the other waves of Kreenox. It was when one of these sorcerers managed to notice the attack from the west side. They immediately sent reinforcements to the position, but they could not prevent the looting, while the stalkers from the north side and south were taking too many losses, and Kreenox ordered them to withdraw immediately. The territory was successfully defended by Gibraltar's warriors despite looting some of its resources, but the invaders suffered even greater losses than the Abidjans, as Kreenox was able to retreat with a handful of stalkers carrying the stolen resources. Despite everything, Kreenox returned to his territory without worries, since he was aware that the stalkers could be easily recovered by giving them part of his energy. With an army of infinite supply, Kreenox would never have any defeat. The Abidjan, after receiving that attack, thanked the Gibraltar warriors for their help, who remind them to stay until they can finish their construction. The warriors of Gibraltar send a messenger to inform their kingdom about the invasion of Kreenox that they were able to neutralize, since the council in a dark time considered him a potential threat to the peace of the other kingdoms. His invasion of Gibraltar caused so much destruction that his inhabitants took years to rebuild it. After the invasion and the failed attempt to spread his chaos in the other kingdoms, Kreenox, driven by anger, tries to assassinate Diego, the magician who, together with other warriors, frustrated his plans of conquest, but in doing so ends up causing his own death. Version of the story told by the sorcerers and the inhabitants who witnessed the invasion and the battle that would culminate the war. Far to the east, Gregorio and Eterios set out for the kingdom of Archidona, which at that time had some sentinels watching the area. Gregorio made sure that he did not represent any threat to the kingdom, since he did not carry any weapons, while Eterios only had as his only resources Spartan sword. His plan was to get as close as possible to the kingdom to be captured and taken to his queen. Doing it during the day was a bad idea, since Gregorio and Eterios knew perfectly well how hostile the inhabitants of Archidona were. These, seeing them from afar, they would immediately shoot them without question and without hesitation. Crawling and hiding as best they could, Gregorio and Eterios managed to evade the sentinels, who could not see so clearly in the darkness of the night. Upon entering the forest, they knew they had made it, but even so they had to be careful of that hostile territory. As they walked into the forest, an explorer manages to notice their presence, so he proceeds to yell at them and point his bow at them. Gregorio and Eterios do not hesitate to stay still and surrender, so the explorer yells for reinforcements, and when the support arrives, they surround them. To the intruders who take away his weapon from Eterios, and his captain asks them, "Who are they? And what are you doing here?" Gregorio replies, "I am the king of Eretria, and he is the king of Sparta. We have come here peacefully to speak with Queen Marivi." The explorers look at each other and wait for the orders of their captain, who looks at them with doubt. Gregorio promises that once he talks to his queen, he will immediately leave his kingdom. He just wanted to talk to Queen Marivi. The captain asks for silence and says, "I will not take you to the queen because you ask me to. I will take you with her because she might have questions." Saying this, the captain orders his soldiers to escort Gregorio and Eterios before the queen. The captain arrives with the queen and says, "My queen, we have found two strangers. They say they are kings of Eretria and Sparta." When Queen Marivi sees them, she asks, "What are two kings of two different nations doing in my territory?" Gregorio replies, "My name is Gregorio. I am king of Eretria, and I have come here peacefully to make an alliance with the kingdom of Archidona." Marivi looks at them strangely because she did not quite understand the reason for their nocturnal visit, to which she replies, "Have you come here to try to make an alliance at night?" Marivi's warriors laugh at the queen's words, and Gregorio replies, "I know it seems inopportune, but it was the only way to avoid getting here without your warriors shooting arrows at us. We want to unify all the kingdoms to create a lasting peace." Marivi thinks for a moment while looking at them both and responds, "The kingdom of Archidona has dominated this forest for decades. Our arrows have offered us enough victories to understand that it does not need an alliance with another kingdom. I understand its objective of peace, but it will be difficult for us to share our culture with you. We are very different. I'm sorry, Gregorio, but I don't want an alliance with your kingdoms." Gregorio lowers his gaze for a moment and answers, "I understand. I knew that maybe I wouldn't accept it, but I had to try." Marivi could understand their objectives, but she was the one who had the last word. The queen ordered Gregorio and Eterios to be taken out of the forest to return to their kingdoms, but as they headed for the exit, a sentinel comes frantically shouting about an impending attack on the kingdom. The captain and the queen were alerted, as the sentinels had detected movement in the skies. The Hellbats were heading to attack the kingdom of Archidona. Hellbats were for a long time staunch enemies of humans and were always accompanied by chaos and death, but before being part of the human world they used to serve loyally in the underworld, being sentinels and guards of it, until a rebellion occurred caused by several Hellbats who wanted to enjoy the pleasures of men, because they wanted to be the bosses and no longer the servants. Their great lord Bill granted them the wish to leave, but upon arriving in the human world they would not continue to be privileged by immortality or their devastating power. They would only have eternal life, control of fire and its power to dominate beings with fragile minds. This was how their fight to survive began. The presence of the Hellbats was greatly feared by the human towns that did not have an army capable of facing them, or even they came to touch them. This caused many innocent towns to be dominated and destroyed by Hellbats, that they unleashed chaos wherever they went. The survivors of these towns took refuge in the territory of the Abidjan, where these mercenaries had enough men to defend themselves against the Hellbats. These, being afraid of being killed, decided to stay in the conquered territories with men and women as slaves to take advantage of the resources and establish his own kingdom to fight against the human territories. The Kingdom of Gibraltar soon manages to find out about the presence of these usurping creatures, so a considerable group of magicians and adepts capable of expelling the Hellbats from the conquered territory is sent. Despite their efforts, the Hellbats were aware that it was impossible to defeat the sorcerers, and they made the decision to take all possible resources and the women to establish their territory in a more discreet place. The Hellbats fled to the frozen mountains, where they reproduced, greatly increasing their society and keeping themselves hidden from the wizards of Gibraltar who were watching their next moves. The maximum leader of the Hellbats, Darian, did not see as an option to return to attack the human territories guarded by Gibraltar, since he could lose many troops in the attempt. This led him to set his eyes on the kingdom of Archidona, a kingdom made up of hundreds of archers who, although they knew of their existence, did not care about them, because there was a great sea that separated them, a sea that Darian wanted to take advantage of so that his Hellbats could attack Archidona's warriors stealthily. He sent a force of more than 100 Hellbats and 50 Banshees to conquer the territory and dominate the other lands without worrying about the intervention of the Kingdom of Gibraltar, since the huge trees were a strong enough strategic point to fight the wizards. Archidona's warriors prepared to defend their territory while Gregorio and Eterios were led out of the forest. Queen Marivi was not willing to witness the battle, because she prepared herself to fight like her warriors. The Hellbats advanced, but did not descend. They flew over the trees, and the Archidona warriors who were still aiming at their enemies lost track of them in the darkness of the night. Queen Marivi ordered them to stay vigilant, as the Hellbats could descend at any time. Meanwhile, the rest of the Hellbats swam, getting close enough to the shore. Thanks to the Banshee's distraction, they were able to aim directly at the enemies and start the surprise attack. The Hellbats on the shore shot their arrows, killing several archers and drawing the attention of the rest. When Archidona's warriors diverted their gaze to the shore, the Banshees descended with speed and shooting fireballs that significantly weakened Archidona's defenses. The Banshees, they were warriors equipped with spears long enough to impale any enemy and shoot fireballs from their hands. Marivi ordered her forces to defend at all costs. While Gregorio and Eterios were still being led out of the forest, they heard the explosions of fire and the agony of many men being killed by the Hellbats. The warriors who escorted them told them to get out of the forest, because his companions needed them. Gregorio, without listening to the explorer's words, said that he wanted to help them in their fight. The explorer could not hear him and ran immediately. Gregorio convinced Eterios to help them in their fight, and they both went to battle. The Archidona front had fallen and the rearguard forces were advancing to reinforce the front, while the queen continued to fight with her double-bladed staff. His warriors had come to his rescue, but the Hellbats continued their advance through the forest, slaughtering any warrior who got close to them. Gregorio equipped himself with a bow and arrow while Eterios took a spear and a sword. They soon met the reinforcements from the rear that could not distinguish them, since they were all focused on liquidating the enemy. Gregorio, despite only being a swordsman, proved to be a skilled warrior with a bow and arrow, while Eterios dispatched banshees with his spear, which he later changed to a banshee spear. This allowed him to have more attack range and neutralize enemies more effectively. Queen Marivi, fighting one in the front, runs into the commander of the Hellbats, Cyclu, who stops one of her attacks and throws her to the ground. To avoid suffering serious damage, he sticks one of his knives into the tree and slows down his attack. Falling, Cyclu tries to attack her, but Gregorio, who is nearby, shoots an arrow into his chest that only bounces off the thick armor he is wearing. Cyclu creates a fireball and shoots it at Gregorio, who manages to dodge it, but losing the bow in the explosion. Without stopping, he drew his sword and fought hand-to-hand against Cyclu, who used part of Marivi's weapon to defend himself, but due to little knowledge of the weapon, Gregorio manages to land a fatal cut on Cyclu's face, who also lost his helmet in the attack. Seeing himself defeated and his forces almost annihilated, he orders the withdrawal of his forces, who raise their wings and head towards their territory. But the commander was not prepared to leave without first causing great destruction to the enemy territory. Cyclu and his surviving banshees burned the trees to generate a chain fire. Archidona's warriors immediately ran, overwhelmed by the fire. Eterios helped those who could to evacuate the forest, while Gregorio, seeing Queen Marivi fainted, carried her in his arms, and I carry it safely. The rest of the inhabitants of Archidona did everything in their power to put out the fire in the trees that burned a large part of their territory and its structures. Cyclu and his Hellbats failed to conquer Archidona, but burning much of its territory could leave their leader satisfied. Throughout the night, the fire had consumed 50% of all the trees in Archidona. The fire continued to advance. Everyone did their best to extinguish the flames, while those affected by the fire gathered on the outskirts of the forest. Eterios had helped save some people who were suffocated by the fire. Gregory carried the queen out of the forest and then came back and did what he could with anyone else who needed help. Gregorio and Eterios, seeing that everyone had been evacuated, joined the soldiers who were trying to extinguish the fire. Gregorio organized the men to cut down several trees and thus prevent the fire from spreading. Together with the other volunteers, they cut down the trees to stop the spread. Fire expansion. In the end, their objective is achieved, but 80% of the forest had been consumed by fire, including the resources of Archidona and their homes. Queen Marivi woke up after a few hours and seeing a large part of the forest destroyed by fire. She cannot help but feel sadness and anger, since this forest was always protected and cared for by her ancestors, who entrusted the task to her next successor to protect the forest, task that she could not fulfill. Destroyed, she remembers that she faced the leader of the Hellbats, thinking that perhaps she should have died at that moment. Convinced of this, she tries to stab herself to end her suffering, but when she wants to try, Gregorio holds her hand, saying, "Queen Marivi, your death will not, it will bring hope to its people." Marivi responds, "I was entrusted with the task of protecting the forest with my life. The forest is destroyed, but I am alive. I am not worthy to be the queen or to be alive." Gregorio thought about his words for a moment, because he perfectly understood his pain. He said, "I understand the pain of your loss. For many years my kingdom suffered attacks from different nations, and at the end of the battles I could never get used to the losses. But I lived despite everything, and I had to move on. You did everything you could to stop them. They could have killed you, but the reason why we didn't stop them is because we don't have the strength. Now that the fire consumed much of your territory, your people need hope in your queen. Only a coward accepts death to escape his problems. You can choose. This time I won't get in the way of your decision." Gregorio returns with the wounded and tries to get some rest after a long night. Eterios accompanies him, who is also tired. Eterios tells him, "Where is the queen?" Gregorio replies he is making a decision. Eterios, with a confused face, does not ask for further explanation. The captain of the explorers manages with his soldiers the number of deaths and survivors of the attack, while Queen Marivi interrupted him by asking how many survived. The captain explains that more than 500 people survived, but they still did not know the total number of deaths. Marivi asks him to gather all the men he can to organize a plan and stop the forest fire, but the captain interrupts him, saying, "It won't be necessary, my queen. We have stopped the spread of the fire by cutting down some trees." The surprised queen thanks the captain for such actions. However, the captain interrupts her, saying it wasn't me who organized the men for that plan, it was King Gregorio who had that idea. Merivi is surprised and tries to find Gregorio. The queen finds him next to Aterios, who try to bow to her, but she interrupts them, saying it is not necessary, they have already done enough for us. The captain mentioned that you, Gregorio, organized the men to cut down the trees and stop the spread of the fire. Gregorio confirms what he said by saying, "That's right, but first we help your people to evacuate the forest. We help everyone who we could, but we couldn't save." Gregorio is interrupted by Merivi, who kneels before him, saying, "Thank you. I really appreciate what you have done for my people. I will never forget the favor. Thank you for helping us." The surprised captain mentions, "I ordered my men to escort them out of the forest. Even so, they decided to come back to help us." Gregorio responds by saying, "We could have left and saved ourselves from that battle, but your people needed help. We couldn't stay without do nothing." The captain can only thank them for their actions as Queen Merivi stands up to address Gregorio and thank him for his words earlier. Gregorio says, "One of your scouts traveled to Gibraltar to report the incident. The sorcerers will come to help their wounded soon. However, I will send workers to help them rebuild their structures, and I will make sure that their people also have a place to sleep. While your kingdom is being rebuilt," at the end Aterios says, "I will also send you some workers, resources, and food for your people. I hope it will be enough." Merivi thanks them with tears in her eyes, and they retire to their respective kingdoms with the promise of sending help to the kingdom of Archidona. Leave me a like to know if you liked it, and subscribe to be aware of the next chapters. Thanks a lot.